Here's a shocking reality that will keep you awake at night. 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck in 2025, and that number is climbing fast. But here's the kicker that nobody's talking about. Even workers earning over $500,000 annually are struggling to make ends meet, with 40% of these high earners saying they're barely scraping by. You heard that right. We're not just talking about minimum wage workers anymore. We're talking about six-figure earners, professionals, and even the wealthy elite who feel financially broken despite bringing home salaries that would have been considered rich just a generation ago. If you think this crisis doesn't affect you, think again. This financial catastrophe is reshaping American society, destroying the middle class, and making basic housing unaffordable for nearly half the workforce. Before we dive deep into this economic disaster, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below sharing your biggest financial concern. Because trust me, you're not alone in this struggle. The shocking numbers behind America's paycheck prison. Let's start with some reality-checking numbers that reveal just how desperate things have become. According to PNC Bank's 2025 Financial Wellness in the Workplace report, 67% of American workers are now living paycheck to paycheck, up from 63% in 2024. That's a 4% increase in just 1 year, meaning millions more families joined the ranks of the financially desperate. But here's where it gets really wild, and this might make you laugh if it weren't so tragic. Goldman Sachs found that 40% of workers earning over $500,000 annually say they're living paycheck to paycheck. That's right, $500,000 earners feel as broke as someone making $30,000. It's like watching millionaires complain about not being able to afford their third yacht while people are choosing between rent and groceries. The breakdown by income levels is absolutely mind-boggling. About 57% of Americans earning less than $50,000 are living paycheck to paycheck, which makes sense, right? But get this, 36% of those making between $50,000 and $100,000 are struggling. 25% earning $100,000 to $200,000 can't make ends meet, and even 16% of people making $200,000 to $300,000 are financially stressed. The most surprising finding? Workers earning $300,000 to $500,000 are actually struggling more than those making $200,000 to $300,000, with 41% living paycheck to paycheck. This isn't just about poverty anymore. It's about lifestyle inflation and a cost of living crisis that's devouring American paychecks at every income level. The housing wage catastrophe. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: housing costs that have gone completely insane. The National Low Income Housing Coalition's 2025 Out of Reach report reveals that Americans need to earn $33.63 per hour just to afford a modest two-bedroom apartment. That's more than 4 times the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. Here's where the math gets scary. The average American renter earns $23.60 per hour, which means they're falling short by over $10 per hour to afford basic housing. A minimum wage worker would need to work 116 hours per week. That's nearly 3 full-time jobs just to afford a two-bedroom apartment. But wait, it gets worse. In California, you need to earn $49.61 per hour to afford that two-bedroom apartment. In New York, it's $46.03 per hour. Even in relatively affordable Texas, you still need $29.64 per hour. There's literally no state in America where a minimum wage worker can afford a modest two-bedroom apartment working 40 hours per week. The housing situation has become so absurd that the typical American household now needs to spend 44.6% of their income just to afford a median-priced home. Remember, financial experts recommend spending no more than 30% of income on housing. We've blown past that recommendation so dramatically that homeownership has become a luxury for the wealthy. Housing now consumes 51% of median household income, compared to just 33% in 2000. That's not a gradual increase. That's a housing affordability apocalypse that's happened over just 25 years. The paycheck to paycheck time bomb. Goldman Sachs predicts this crisis will get much worse. They project that 55% of workers will be living paycheck to paycheck by 2033, jumping to 65% by 2043. Think about that for a moment. We're heading toward a future where 2/3 of American workers can't survive financially between paychecks. The human cost of this crisis is devastating. About 70% of younger workers who experienced major life events like marriage, divorce, or home purchases in the past 2 years had to stop retirement contributions, borrow from retirement plans, or delay retirement entirely. We're watching an entire generation sacrifice their future financial security just to survive today. The regional variations tell an interesting story, too. The South Atlantic region, which includes Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, has the highest percentage of paycheck-to-paycheck households at around 28%. Meanwhile, the Northeast Mid-Atlantic region has the lowest percentage, though lowest is still devastatingly high: the emergency savings desert. Here's a statistic that should terrify every American. 24% of Americans have no emergency savings whatsoever. None. Zero. Zilch. If their car breaks down, if they get sick, if any unexpected expense hits, they're completely defenseless. Only 41% of Americans would pay for a $1,000 emergency from their savings, and that percentage is actually declining. Most people would put it on a credit card and pay it off over time, borrow from family, or cut spending elsewhere. We're talking about $1,000 here, not $10,000. A basic car repair or emergency room visit could financially devastate nearly 60% of Americans. The generational breakdown is particularly heartbreaking. Among Gen Zers, only 28% would use savings for a $1,000 emergency, while 34% have no emergency savings at all. Compare that to baby boomers, where 59% would use savings and only 16% have no emergency fund. We're watching financial security disappear as you move down the age brackets. The Social Security nightmare. Now let's talk about Social Security, because the numbers here are absolutely frightening for anyone planning to retire. The 2025 cost of living adjustment was just 2.5%, adding about $50 monthly to the average retirement benefit. The average Social Security recipient now gets $1,176 per month. But here's the problem. That's nowhere near enough to survive. According to the Elder Economic Security Standard Index, a single homeowner without a mortgage needs approximately $2,099 monthly just to cover basic necessities. Single renters need $2,566 monthly, while homeowners with mortgages need $3,249. The cruel mathematics show that Social Security covers less than what people need to survive, even for those with paid-off homes. For renters, Social Security benefits fall almost $600 short of basic living expenses every month. That's a $7,200 annual shortfall that has to come from somewhere else. Jan Muchler, a gerontology professor, noted that there's no county in America where average Social Security benefits provide a satisfactory standard of living. We've created a retirement system that mathematically guarantees poverty for anyone depending primarily on Social Security. The minimum wage poverty trap. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour hasn't increased since 2009, making it officially a poverty wage in 2025. A full-time minimum wage worker earns about $15,080 annually before taxes. The federal poverty line for a single person is $15,060. We're literally paying people poverty wages and calling it employment. But even states with higher minimum wages aren't solving the problem. Washington, D.C. has the highest minimum wage at $1,750 per hour, but even at that rate, workers can't afford basic housing in the area. The disconnect between wages and costs has become so severe that even significantly above minimum wages don't provide basic financial security. Here's what's really maddening. 48% of the entire U.S. workforce, about 74 million people, work in occupations that don't pay enough to afford a one-bedroom apartment. We're talking about essential workers like home health aides, food service workers, and administrative assistants who literally can't afford to live where they work. The Great Wage Theft. Carter Price from Rand Corporation has documented something that should enrage every American worker. If the U.S. had maintained the same income distribution that existed in 1975, the bottom 90% of earners would have collectively taken home about $3.9 trillion more in 2023 alone. Read that again. $3.9 trillion that should have gone to working Americans instead got funneled upward to the wealthy. Over the past 5 decades, we've witnessed the largest transfer of wealth from workers to owners in American history. This isn't capitalism, this is organized theft disguised as economic policy. Between 1970 and 2019, earnings for lower-income individuals increased by only 3% when adjusted for inflation. Middle-income earners saw just a 13.7% improvement. Meanwhile, the top 1% of earners experienced a 160% increase during the same period. The game is rigged, and working Americans are losing. The credit card debt spiral. With stagnant wages and exploding costs, Americans are increasingly turning to credit cards just to survive. Credit card interest rates have reached their highest average APR in history, currently hovering around 24 to 28% for many cards. People are using credit cards for basic necessities like utility bills and gas for their cars. The problem is that families can't pay off these charges within 30 days, so they're accumulating interest charges at devastating rates. When you're already living paycheck to paycheck, adding high-interest debt creates a trap that's almost impossible to escape. Each month, more of your paycheck goes to servicing debt instead of covering basic needs. This creates a vicious cycle where people go deeper into debt just to maintain their current lifestyle, let alone improve their situation. Credit cards have become America's informal welfare system, except this welfare system charges 25% interest and can destroy your financial future. Regional variations and hidden costs. The paycheck-to-paycheck crisis varies significantly by region, but not always in ways you'd expect. The South Atlantic region has the highest concentration of struggling households. Even though housing costs may appear lower on paper, the reality is that wages in these areas are often even lower than the housing costs, creating affordability problems despite seemingly cheaper real estate. Meanwhile, areas like the Northeast may have higher costs but also higher wages, creating a different but equally challenging dynamic. The key insight is that this crisis transcends geography. It's a national emergency affecting working families everywhere. The policy failures behind the crisis. This crisis didn't happen by accident. It's the result of decades of policy choices that prioritized wealthy interests over working families. Federal housing investments have been cut while zoning restrictions prevent new construction, creating artificial scarcity that drives up prices. The federal minimum wage has been frozen for over 15 years, while productivity has soared. Corporate consolidation has given employers more power to suppress wages while increasing prices. Tax policies have shifted the burden from corporations and wealthy individuals to working families. Meanwhile, programs that could help, like expanded housing vouchers, universal health care, or affordable child care, remain underfunded or non-existent. We're forcing American families to navigate an impossible economic landscape without the tools they need to succeed. Looking ahead to the rest of the 2020s and into the 2030s, the outlook for American workers is genuinely terrifying unless we see dramatic policy changes. Goldman Sachs predicts that by 2033, 55% of Americans will be living paycheck to paycheck, climbing to 65% by 2043. That's not just a statistic, that's a prediction of social and economic collapse. Here's what we can expect if current trends continue. First, homeownership will become exclusively for the wealthy. With median home prices requiring 44.6% of median household income, and that percentage climbing, we're moving toward a feudal system where most Americans will be permanent renters. Second, retirement will become impossible for most Americans. When you can barely survive between paychecks, saving for retirement becomes a luxury you can't afford. We're heading toward a future where working until you die won't be a choice, it'll be a necessity. Third, the social and political consequences will be severe. When 65% of Americans are living in financial desperation, that creates the conditions for social unrest and political extremism. Desperate people make desperate choices, and a society where 2/3 of workers can't achieve basic financial security is not sustainable. However, there are some potential policy solutions that could reverse these trends if implemented quickly and aggressively. Raising the federal minimum wage to at least $15 per hour would provide immediate relief for millions of workers, though even that would fall short of what's needed in many areas. Massive federal investment in housing construction, similar to post-World War II programs, could begin addressing the supply shortage that's driving up costs. Zoning reform to allow more density near jobs and transit could help, but it needs to happen nationwide, not just in a few progressive cities. Universal health care would eliminate medical bankruptcies and free up family budgets currently consumed by insurance premiums and medical bills. Universal basic income or expanded earned income tax credits could provide the income support that wages alone aren't providing. But here's the harsh reality. These solutions require political will that currently doesn't exist. The same wealthy interests benefiting from current arrangements have enormous political influence to prevent changes that might reduce their profits. The most likely scenario is continued deterioration until the crisis becomes so severe it forces dramatic political change. History suggests this could take the form of a populist political movement, massive labor organizing, or social unrest that makes maintaining the status quo impossible.